Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Multifamily Hangout. We're super pleased to have an amazing guest today. But before we get to that, I'm Adrian Danila, your host, with Chris Moreno right here in the studio. I'm going to let him introduce our guest. But before we do that, I want to acknowledge our sponsors that are making this broadcast possible. So they are Apartment Snapshot, Kairos Water, and GPS Roof Leak Repairs. Welcome to the Multifamily Hangout. And Chris Moreno, take it away, sir.
Thank you, Adrian, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us live. We have an amazing guest today. I'm very excited. Gotten to know this person for many years. And Jennifer is not only a leader, but she is engaging and positive and optimist, but also a realist. So I'm really excited to hear some of her secrets today. She has worked at some of the largest companies in the multifamily space and also taken on some of the biggest initiatives. So she's not, oftentimes we pigeonhole ourselves or pigeonhole certain people, and she has such knowledge across technology, marketing, operations. Without further ado, I want to welcome, just so you know, people call her J Stack because her last name, I've probably mispronounced it dozens of times, but it's Jennifer Staciokas, the president of Western Wealth Community. So welcome, Jennifer. Did I get it right?
You got it right. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for joining us today. And I think without further ado, I'd love to hear a little bit maybe from your own point of view before we jump into the discussion, a little bit maybe of like how you started off in multifamily and what got you into multifamily to where you are today.
My story started almost 25 years ago in the Washington, D.C. area, and I was right out of college working a job in research, basically doing research for a pharmaceutical firm. And I knew that wasn't my long-term job. I was just waiting to go to graduate school. And I had quit the job as I was getting ready to go back to school and walked into the elevator of the apartment building. And lo and behold, there was a flyer saying looking for fun, enthusiastic people that want to save money on their rent. And I went into the leasing office, talked to the assistant manager at the time, and ended up getting hired on the spot and became a leasing professional at Lincoln Property Company 25 years ago. And that opportunity, what I thought was going to be a temporary job for a year and a half while I completed my schooling, ended up turning into a now 25-year career in this industry and hopefully many more years to come. But I've had the great opportunity to work for three amazing organizations. I started at Lincoln in leasing, worked on site for about a year total, and then moved into a regional office for about 7.5 years. And then the remainder of my time spent in Dallas in a national role, and then had the opportunity to join Pinnacle and lead their marketing, training, revenue management team, as well as launch 3 of their brands that they were going forward with. And then had the very unique experience to join Western Wealth Capital in March of 2020. They were looking to bring management in-house, and they were looking for somebody to build the platform, hire the team, and get that initiative underway. And so I jumped at the chance to take a risk and have an opportunity to do that.
Jennifer, amazing, outstanding career. Many of us are looking up to someone like you, and they have a question. What are the best things that you learn along the way?
Quite a few lessons. So the first one I would say is you should listen more than you speak. It's really amazing what you find out about people by just listening instead of being so focused on what your thoughts are and what point you want to get across. So it's a huge recommendation I give to people. Listen more than you speak. Another thing is, this is a lot of study that I've been doing probably over the last 10 years, but around focusing on what you can control, putting your energy to those things that you can control. And then also those things that you can't control, focusing on how you're going to respond to them. Because as a leader, I find that everybody is watching my every move, listening to my every word and interpreting it in the way that they're hearing it. And so it's so important that the words that I'm saying match the actions that I take, and that I can't get flustered about things that I don't have in my control, and really need to spend my time and my team's time and energy focusing on those items that I can control. Another thing I would share is one of my favorite Ted Lasso isms for anybody that's watched Ted Lasso is to be a goldfish. And Chris, I love when you described to me that you talked about positivity and optimism, because it is something that I really try and embody in my life. And it was something that came through growing up with my family, that was part of what, defined who I was. But being a goldfish, for those of you that haven't watched Ted Lasso, is they claim the goldfish is the happiest animal in the world because they have an attention span of no more than 10 seconds. You make a mistake, you evaluate that mistake, and then you move on. And you don't keep bringing it up and keep beating yourself up about something that went wrong. You have to move forward. You have to stay positive, and you have to see the good in everything and everybody. And then I think the last piece of advice, I would say, it's a quote that my team hears me say quite a bit, but it's the Michelle Obama quote that when they go low, we go high. So that can sit in so many different scenarios, right? You can have an angry resident that comes in and is speaking negatively to you. Don't go low, still go high. Provide that great customer service. Basically surprise them with the way that you react to their negativity. You can have that with a team member, with a peer, with a supplier partner. Always take the high road and try and solve the problem. So bring solutions instead of adding to the problem.
Those are some great isms, words of wisdom for people to take down and follow through on. I think there's so much advice out there that can be really bad advice. And then there's a small amount of advice that actually is very helpful to people. And, as you hear some of these stories, I'm kind of just curious to get your take because you've seen a lot of different groups. You've worked, obviously having the experience in marketing, but technology and operations. Can you share maybe a story around, you've seen a lot of changes. You've seen a lot of things that also maybe weren't necessarily trends, but maybe they were more fads. Kind of curious to hear your thoughts. Like, what are some of the significant changes you've witnessed that were pretty impactful, maybe that you doubled down on? And then maybe some that, or even maybe if you want to share one that you doubled down on and didn't actually pan out the way you thought.
Sure. So I have definitely seen a lot of changes, right? When I found my very first apartment, I found it in the ads of the newspaper, right? The classifieds in the newspaper. So that could be very foreign to some people listening because that is no longer a thing. So we've completely changed digitally how people find apartments and how they move in and handle their residency. But one of the first changes I would talk about is 25 years ago, there's a whole different level of professionalism in our industry right now. So even though 25 years ago there was a professional management companies, and I worked for one of the leading management companies. However, there's just a whole different sense of professionalism in our industry, sophistication in our industry, and an ability to embrace change as it relates to technology. So that's one of the major changes I have seen. I've also seen, the tech that's come into our business has completely changed the way that we do business. So 25 years ago, I was backing up files on floppy disks and saving them into the safe. And then the next day, you're putting the floppy disk back in and making sure that the system boots back up. Now everything's in the cloud and we're dealing with things, instantaneously. And then there's certainly things, Chris, I think to your point, you're asking about, where's something that maybe is completely flopped. So I've always been a firm believer in being tech forward and taking a chance on technology. So it's worth taking a risk when it's a calculated risk. And so it doesn't mean that you chase the shiny new penny that's out there, but you really take the meetings. I take a lot of meetings from companies that maybe I've never heard of, but they have a unique selling proposition that is going to solve a problem that I'm facing within my organization. And so I'm always willing to take those meetings to see if there's something that can solve a problem that I'm currently facing. And sometimes you take those meetings and they work out beautifully. And I have many success stories where we started with a pilot, we were able to prove out the metrics, and then actually roll it out to the entire portfolio. And then I've had instances where we've rolled something out and it hasn't been a success. But I always tell people it's okay to fail. And your team has to know that it's also okay to fail as long as you recover quickly and you learn from it. And so again, doing a quick debrief of what went wrong, what did we learn from the situation? Is there some good still in this technology? Are we just partnered with the wrong partner? Or are we just not ready for this in our workflow? And when you do that debrief, you figure out what's going on, act quickly, and then learn from your mistakes. I think your team feels that it is okay to fail. And when you're a goldfish, you don't remember 10 seconds later I have to say 10 seconds is not my memory span, but a day later, a week later, you forget. And often when people sometimes ask me, what's your biggest failure? I have a hard time answering that because when you are a goldfish, you don't dwell on the things that you did wrong. You dwell on how did I solve that problem and how did I fix it and move forward so I didn't have to have that situation happen again.
Before going to my next question, I do want to thank all of you in the audience. I want to ask you to drop your name in a comment box. Tell us where you're watching us from and drop us a few questions for Jennifer. We'd like to take questions from the audience. Jennifer, I want to know what inspired you to become a part of this project, building a property management company from scratch. And secondly, could you share some challenges and opportunities that are coming with building a management company basically from zero?
Absolutely. So what inspired me was I got the call from a recruiter and it seemed like it was too good to be true. I live in Phoenix and the recruiter that reached out said, we are looking for somebody that's based in Phoenix to bring management in-house for an owner out of Vancouver, British Columbia. You know, I've worked for two of the largest organizations in the industry and had such amazing experiences. You know, when you work for a large organization, you have so much support. You have so many different departments that can assist and solve problems. And I really wanted the opportunity to build that from scratch for myself. And so I knew that if I didn't take this opportunity when it was offered to me, that a couple years down the road, I was going to regret it. And I didn't want to have that regret. I didn't want to look back at the end of my career and say, wow, I really wonder what would have been if I had taken on that opportunity. So it certainly was a risk. And the other thing to mention is, you know, this was in March of 2020. So if everybody rewinds back to March of 2020, you were probably sitting in your living room or your home office working. And it was a big risk. And I remember the CEO, when I had accepted the job, we didn't know that there was lockdown and COVID was going to be what it actually became. And I gave notice the day that lockdown basically happened. And my boss at that time at Pinnacle said, is this a joke? Like, are you really giving notice in the middle of lockdown? And I said, yes, I feel really passionately about what it is that I'm setting out to do. And this is absolutely what I want to do. And then the CEO of Western Wealth Capital said to me after about a week after I started, she said, all I have to say is you've got a lot of guts because it's a big risk, right? And we're trying to do this during COVID. Some of the challenges that we encountered is because of COVID, it accelerated our business plan. And I had a very, very short timeline in order to bring the first set of properties on board. So we onboarded our first 10 communities. These were communities that we already owned, but were being third-party managed by 4 different providers. And so we were bringing management in-house. And when I originally was supposed to have 90 days, that seemed like doable. And with COVID, it accelerated to, I think it was 28 days that we had to get the properties onboarded and ready to go. And so just to put that into perspective, it's not just a traditional takeover that's happening. We actually had to build the infrastructure of our management company and able to support that. So that was setting up our property management software, setting up our lead management software, negotiating all of our contracts, making sure we had websites built and ready to go on day one, making sure all of our advertising was up and running. You name it, all the technology that you need to run a management company, and also make sure that the employees are going to get paid had to be done ahead of time. And so that was a major challenge on the short timeline that we had. And then COVID on top of that was such a challenge because I jokingly say, but it is the truth, that we were building the airplane while we were flying it. We had no other choice because of the short timeline. But layer on top of that COVID. So I also was having to create from scratch all of our COVID protocols for the teams. So we were working on signage and collateral. And our construction management department did something very innovative. So we didn't have to shut down our offices. They built what we called COVID walls, which were plexiglass walls that basically when you walked into the lobby, we had a plexiglass wall that you still could pass information through an open hole. And you could speak to people face to face, but have the protection of the plexiglass. So we had to deal with all the COVID protocol, plus setting up the company, plus onboarding 10 properties in short term. And then we moved quickly in Arizona to bring on the remainder of those assets while at the same time becoming an aggressive buyer throughout COVID. So we started buying in Arizona in May of 2020 and then started onboarding Texas in 2021 and became an active buyer in the Texas market as well. And so we launched, we went from 0 units in March of 2020 when I joined to 2,000 units in April of 2020. And at our peak in 2 years, we went to 17,000 units. So it was really incredible growth, and also making sure, I think one of the other main learnings in a startup is making sure you have the right people joining your team that truly understand what startup mentality is. It sounds really exciting, and it sounds like the sexy thing to do is to join a startup, but it's a lot of hard work. And for people that are very structured and used to having policy and procedure and everything set in place and going to a known resource to get answers, that is not what a startup is. You're the one that gets to create all of that, and you have to be open and willing to do that. And we found where we've had some people that just didn't make it in the organization, it's because they were not used to the startup environment, and they really wanted the structure that a stable organization provides to them. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just really taking the time on the front end to make sure they get the right people in the right seats that can be flexible and understand that startup mentality.
What an incredible timeline you were, and pressure it must have been for your team to get that done in this shift, as you talk about with COVID, from lockdowns to then wanting to be in front of people, and then a shift back to centralization. The word centralization comes up a lot. Is that, and maybe is that a part, you talk about us being a startup and that startup mentality. What are the key strategies for you all at Western Wealth? What differentiates you from maybe some other management companies?
When we first built the company, I actually would tell people that I don't run a management company. I run a staffing agency and I run a technology company, because yes, we are a property management organization and we do all of the functions of a property management organization. But we went straight out of the gate really tech heavy. But I also like to say there's a fine line between technology and people. I also serve as our vice president of people and technology for the investment company, because if you don't get the people side of the business right, you'll never get anything else right. And so that has been a main focus of focusing on hiring the right people, getting them in the right seats, and then leveraging technology where it makes sense to reduce noise on site to allow them to maximize performance. Centralization has been a key initiative of ours since the fall of 2022. So somebody on my team came to me and said, I really think there's a great opportunity to start centralizing. And so I tasked her, and she put together a small task force of people to map out what that would look like for our organization. And I would like to say we've successfully launched that, and we call our centralization initiative Enhanced Services, where we do have people sitting in a corporate office doing centralized tasks. However, we really wanted to talk about that function as providing additional support for our on-site team members, so it would free them up to take care of those more high-value interactions that they're having with the resident or the prospect for leasing, renewals, maintenance, etc. And so that was the rationale behind our starting of that group. And we have focused first on the admin side of centralization. So there's a lot of buzz about centralization, and there's 3 main areas: admin, leasing, and maintenance. And at Western Wealth, we decided we were going to take the low-hanging fruit and start with admin first. And also when we started brainstorming, that was the one that there was the least barrier to entry to get involved. We have built a team that centralizes all of those tasks like move-ins, move-outs, everything to do with renewals, making sure month-to-months are being handled, and then also evaluating and auditing all of the charges that are related with move-in, move-out, renewal, etc., and various other tasks and functions that they do. But we've been able to successfully centralize those functions, make our teams more productive, and allow them more time to train and mentor their teams, focus more on the exterior of the community, as well as the service requests and the maintenance on the properties.
Before going to my next question, I just want to thank again the audience and drop your questions for Jennifer in a comment box. We're monitoring the boxes. We're going to take questions from you. We're going to ask her on your behalf. Jennifer, would you like to stay a little bit more on centralization and just kind of go a little deeper, more granular into what centralization looks like on the maintenance side for your business? As you know, my background is in there, so I'm super passionate about particularly maintenance centralization.
Absolutely. So I can't tell you what, we haven't actually implemented that yet, but I can tell you what the vision of it is.
Sure.
And there's some great supplier partners out there doing some great work that are going to allow us to be able to centralize easier. And so when I think of centralization, I'm thinking about how can we pool tasks together? How can we create pods within our organizations to better support the communities, as well as allow people to really focus on a skill set that they're very skilled at. You know, when you think about some of the biggest barriers to entry in maintenance, and something I think that keeps me up at night, and Adrian, we may have talked about this before, is bringing that talent pool into our industry and keeping them there. So when we talk about the challenges we have with maintenance, it's not with our existing maintenance teams. We have some truly incredible teams out there, but unfortunately, we need to bring in some younger talent that's going to be able to replace that older talent as they move forward in their careers and on with their lives. And I do say we have two teams specifically here in Phoenix where we're very fortunate that those two teams have been together for an extended amount of time. So there was one community we bought in December of 2020, and that maintenance team is still with us to this day. And the tenure, I think the shortest tenure of that team is 13 years at that property. So that team has been together. Those three gentlemen have been together for 13 years working together. And we have another community that we bought in May of 2020. And that team has also been together for a significant amount of time prior to us owning and managing that building. But that team has stayed intact. And there's something to be said about having consistency, having people that truly know the residents and have built a relationship and a bond with them. And so our goal is, how can we get more longevity out of our teams? And what are the biggest concerns and complaints that we get? And one of those is certainly having to pull maintenance call. We actually have a training going on in our office today, and I was meeting with the two new leasing professionals that joined. And one of the leasing professionals actually started his career in maintenance. He left the industry and came back now in leasing. And he told me the reason he left was because he didn't want to take call. And so I think that is a huge area where we can all do better as an industry of allowing people more time in the evenings and the weekends to be with their family and friends and have a true work-life balance, and also allow people to focus on particular skills. If they're really well-versed in pool maintenance or in HVAC, in plumbing, in electrical, allowing them to specialize in some of those areas and then service multiple communities and make sure that they're compensated for that appropriately. So those are a lot of the conversations that we're having. We do have mass, I would say, or density in Phoenix, Tucson, and Dallas, where we can start thinking through some of those ideas and providing a better place to work, for our team members, and also be able to attract better team members and create longevity there.
It's amazing as you share these stories about individual properties and the tenure they've had and the bonds they've had and how important, it sounds like people and culture. I think that's definitely something I've learned from you over the years, is how important that is. I love how you said, really you run a staffing organization and a technology organization. I'm curious, to dive deeper into that, thinking about some of and hopefully you can share a secret or two with the audience and with us. Are there any initiatives or innovative projects you're spearheading, at Western Wealth and maybe that are going to have a significant impact or that you're seeing are having an impact to connect the properties to your central teams, especially because you have teams in so many different markets? I'm kind of curious to hear what's working, maybe if you have some innovation that you could share with us, or that maybe You can even just say the topic if you can't say the name of it yet.
One of the major initiatives we're working on now, so enhanced services was something that was, main focus. We got admin completed. Maintenance is next on the docket to tackle. But the other big project that we've been working on is, I won't say names of products. People can reach out to me separately if they'd like. But really consolidating how you're pricing your apartments based on the demand that's there. I've been a firm believer, and I've been speaking about this for conferences, that I always wanted to have the dashboard where I could literally adjust the spend that I needed in my marketing based on the exposure that I had, what I was facing, looking at historical data and knowing where I was going to have to spend more money. And then also having the ability to scale back my spend because I don't have the exposure. So we've been working with a group to really take our digital spend, our pricing advisory services, as well as our CRM, and look at all that data to have some prescriptive actions to take. And so that's been an exciting project. We're not all the way complete, but we have many of the major parts in place. So we think we can truly focus on making sure we're maximizing the spend on advertising. We're not giving away money on the rental front, and really making those things aligned and looking at things much further in advance.
There's a question coming from Jennifer. Staffing has been tough. What do you think attracts and keeps high caliber employees?
Yeah. So I think, let's talk first about what keeps high caliber employees. It's, making sure people are in the know and they feel like they are part of the organization, that they have a seat at the table and they can have a voice. I take the opportunity quite a bit. So we survey our employees. We do town halls afterwards to talk through the results. We briefly share the things we're doing well. We all know what we do well. We focus and celebrate the successes that we've had. And then we spend quite a bit of time on where we're going to improve as an organization. And I am a firm believer that I have an open door policy, right? If there is something that isn't right, something that needs to be adjusted, I want people to speak their mind and say something. I always say it doesn't mean just because you say it, it means we're going to do it. But I want people to know that their opinions matter. We're going to take every opinion into account, and we're going to do what's best and what's right for the organization. So I think when people feel that they're being heard, they want to be a part of that. Another thing I think it can be attracting and retaining is giving people a purpose beyond just the job that they're doing. And something that I think Western Wealth does really well is giving back to the communities that we're in. We do various things, but two of our main initiatives. The first is We've Got Your Back, where we give fully stocked backpacks to every child that lives at all of our communities across the country. And we do that in July before school starts. And we normally do some form of event where we invite the children in to the apartment communities and make a big deal out of the school year. We manage a lot of workforce housing, and so giving these parents a leg up by providing school supplies and a backpack takes one of those burdens off of their list when they think about the new school year. The second initiative that we focus on is called Rent-Free Christmas, and it's actually November, we gift free rent for the month of December to one of our residents at all of our communities. And then all of those stories for those nominees, for those communities, get put into a survey, and our employees vote on the families that they think need it the most. And those families are given what we called our full rental or full Christmas experience. And we give them a tree if they need it, the food for the celebration if they need it. And then they also have the opportunity to give us their wish list. And normally it ends up being a family with children, and we can provide Christmas for families that may not be able to celebrate it whatsoever. And it really is life-changing. And as much as it means to the residents that are gifted the backpacks, the free rent, or the full experience, I sometimes walk away from it feeling like it's impacted our employees even more than the people that actually benefited from it, because it feels good to give back. And we find that the employees that are attracted to our organization have that as a core value personally, and it really aligns with our professional beliefs. And so giving people that opportunity, I think they see that it's something that's important to us and it has to be important to them. After our manager meetings, we try and do some form of give back. Last week, we went to Feed My Starving Children and participated in that. So it's just any way possible. We have a cereal drive going on right now in all of our communities as well as our corporate offices. So it's a big part of our culture and who we are. And it's really important that, yes, we run real estate, but we're doing something larger than just running real estate. We're giving back to the communities where we own and operate.
Love those stories. And, you're thinking beyond just business. You're thinking about the lives and how these people, live in the sanctuary of your properties. So absolutely love it. We'll have to definitely talk more about Philadelphia. I know I talked with some folks last week at NAA, and I'm not sure if you did too or have plans. Are you planning some give back events for Philadelphia and NAA or not quite yet?
Not quite yet, but would love to talk to you about that.
We'll definitely have to talk. I think they're in early discussions, and NAA Gives, I think, is doing some really cool stuff. So you're so active with NAA, NMHC, AZ Crew, and I got to meet you, Raymond, Rick, a lot of folks who have worked through those organizations and the leadership and get to learn so much. How do you think about these different organizations? Because it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of dedication. And how important is that in terms of like the collaboration with other organizations as well as the networking, right, to build your career? What advice do you have other people, and how important has it been to you?
Absolutely. I think it's so important to get involved either in your local apartment association, some of the national organizations. It's how you network and meet people. It's how you learn new ideas. It's how you grow yourself and how you challenge yourself. I'm a firm believer, too, that it's how we can give back and really show the impact that our industry is making. So many times there's a bad rap about landlords, right? And we're really trying to professionalize our industry and show people that it is way more than just being the stereotypical landlord. And getting involved in those organizations allows you to do that. I've been very fortunate that at both Lincoln and Pinnacle, the top leadership was very involved in those organizations and encouraged it and volunteered me to become part of it. Those organizations need more volunteers. They want more activity. They want more collaboration. And just like I mentioned with maintenance, we also need to make sure that that next generation of talent is getting involved and has a voice to continue the great work that's being done on Capitol Hill, at your local capitals, really on behalf of your organization to make sure that real estate is considered when the laws are being passed. Raise your hand. The big thing I would say is, some advice too is not just with the organizations, but overall is volunteer. Raise your hand. Become a subject matter expert in something or multiple things and then speak about it. And when I was first starting in the industry, social media wasn't a thing. So there was no way to really promote yourself from that perspective. There's so many opportunities now to make connections. Adrian and Chris, you guys are both perfect examples of that. Adrian, you can see your posts everywhere and it has such a large reach. And that really impacts people in our industry, allows them to learn and grow, and also see that there's a path for them to be able to do that as well. And so become a subject matter expert, post things out there, engage, raise your hand to speak on panels. That was how I ended up getting my name out there, is speaking on a couple of panels and becoming a subject matter expert on something. And that turns into something more. And I've now been able to meet many of my lifelong friends through this industry that I've never worked at the same company with them, but had the opportunity through NAA or NMHC to work together on committees, attend events, and just get to know people. And it also allows you to have a lifeline of people because you're always going to encounter things that you don't know how to handle. And I like to say pretty much every day I'm out of my comfort zone, right? Something's coming across my desk that I've never dealt with before. And that's okay, right? Because there's always somebody else that that has probably dealt with a situation like that. And pick up the phone, send them a text. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help because it will come back to you tenfold. I'm a firm believer in that.
The next question comes from someone from the audience, and this comes from Kyle Renz. Carl is asking, what KPIs do you look for before ramping up ad spend on a new property?
Yes, great question, Kyle. So it's so important that in property management, you've seen the Staples easy button before. A lot of people want to press the easy button. And what I mean by that is they want to change price or they want to add more advertising. And I'm a firm believer, and my team is a firm believer, that we need to diagnose what the real problem is first. You have to dig deep and you start looking at first, what is the actual traffic that's coming into your CRM? Is it being worked? Are there leads sitting in the queue that have been unanswered? And also start listening to phone calls. So if you see that your conversions are really low, what is the real reason for that? You can hear the on-site teams tell you, but when you actually start listening to phone calls and diagnosing what's happening, you can either rule out that it's not a people issue or that it is a people issue. Also start looking at all of your competitors and what are they doing? Are you priced below or over market? So are you being too aggressive or are you not being aggressive enough? I'm a firm believer in walking your property quite frequently and understanding your product compared to what your competitors are offering. And so again, looking at those conversions, looking at your lead tracking, listening to phone calls to figure out what's happening, also looking for trends. If there's a particular source that's driving a significant amount of traffic, but it's not converting, that's the source that maybe isn't for you. It's just creating noise for your on-site teams, and it's not delivering you the results that you need. And then when you also start looking and uncovering, there may be a source that you're already utilizing that's working quite well. Maybe there's an opportunity to upgrade the package, to add something additional on, to get even more eyeballs onto your website to convert into those leads and leases.
The way you talk about diving deeper into the problem, rather than the solution, trying to jump to quick solutions. Something I learned early in my career was making mistakes. And for me, it's now fall in love with the problem. Don't fall in love with the solution, fall in love with the problem, solve that problem. But the solutions are going to change over time, right? We've seen that from the various startups that have come out, and they're no longer startups anymore. Now they're behemoths. But
I add one more thing to that train of thought too.
Yeah.
So we did a reorg I think it was last fall, where we did a reorganization and we created what we call our property performance group. I think this could be something that's really relevant to the team. So a lot of management companies tend to run in silos where you have people doing specific tasks within a silo. And we decided to make the concerted effort to bring those teams together under property performance. So I took one of my superstars and made her the VP of property performance, where she oversees revenue management, marketing, training, what we call corporate operations, which really is a lot of the technology that we utilize to run the properties. And she also oversees our enhanced services team. And so that team is really working hand in hand. And a big thing that we focused on is, so we grew very quickly, and then we've also been selling some of our communities. So we've had, some change in our portfolio. And where when you're a large organization, you can really specialize on something in particular. But when you become a really nimble shop, you really need what are called utility players, right? Somebody that I can tap on the bench and say, hey, you're in now. You're going to train something today, or you're going to help with this initiative. So we've really made a large focus on cross-training that team so they can be tapped on the shoulder and they can go into the game when they need to be and when we need them to be. So I think that's something too, that when you're looking at your organizations, don't be afraid to change and do something different and get out of the mentality of we've always done it that way. It's not going to work into the future. If you keep doing the same things, you're going to keep getting the same results.
One of the things we hear a lot about now, especially with like Simon Sinek and others of great leaders, is vulnerability. We don't know all the answers, and we need to get our teams to help us and be the smartest people. We don't need to be the smartest people in the room. And I think one of the things I'd love to hear from you is a story back to, it could be maybe more recent, but maybe more earlier in your career, of like a big challenge you faced, whether it was at a company or with yourself, or even in your career, and maybe how you overcame that obstacle.
many obstacles. I would say I've already shared the story of starting the management company. That's by far the largest obstacle I've experienced. But I will say too, so we got through the startup, we got through the heavy growth, and many of us are in that next stage, right? We had COVID, and now we're in that next stage of the financial markets and where everything is. And there's a whole different focus on operations, and everybody's eyes are on operations because people aren't buying for the most part. They're trying to figure out what's going on with their portfolios and how they're going to handle it. And so I think the biggest challenge we faced is going from quick growth, setting up a company, now going to disposing of some assets, but also really focusing on cash flow and making sure that those properties are performing optimally and at the best that they possibly can. And so, that's a challenge. And we've rolled out a couple different ways to focus on that. And so one report we have is if you hit a particular metric or you don't hit a particular metric, you have a report that you need to fill out and complete weekly. And that gets reviewed by myself, our regional vice presidents, our RPMs, and the performance team, and really coming up with creative ways to try and solve for any operational issues that are going on. And it's really allowing for collaboration and cross-functional education to happen. And so that's been a game changer for us, where the manager's completing the report, they're submitting it, it's being reviewed, and then there's a weekly call with all of the managers in that region that can actually talk through the challenges that they're facing and maybe some of the situations and ways that they're overcoming the objections that they're getting. And so I think it's sitting back and diagnosing, okay, what is the problem? What different process and procedure can we put in place to solve for that? And then how can we hold our teams accountable to get the actions that we're looking for?
I want to give a shout out to our audience. We just surpassed our highest audience numbers all time. So that's thanks to you, because, it's the same Chris and I every single episode. So thank you for that, Jennifer, for making that happen, making us establish a record audience today.
Glad to have everybody on.
I do want to ask you about leadership. The journey at the top could feel very lonely at times. Do you experience that feeling every now and then, often, and how do you overcome that feeling?
As I mentioned before, it's, you have to be aware that everybody is watching you. So you can't lose your cool, right? I have to wait. Maybe sometimes I go out to my car and have a minute, have a breath. But I think the key to that is, having a partner in life so I'm very fortunate. I've been married for 20 years to my husband. He is my biggest cheerleader, no doubt. He's come into the office. He's helped move our offices. He basically should be on the payroll. And I'm getting a little teary-eyed about it. I think it's important when you think about being lonely at the top, you have to have somebody that you can talk to, be it your parents, be it a friend, be it your husband, your wife, and have somebody that's always going to have your back, but also be very real with you when you're not thinking straight or you're doing something that isn't in alignment with what you would normally do, and having somebody that can give you that feedback. And then I think it's also really important that you have a network of, who's your tribe? Who are your people? And some people may have seen on Facebook or LinkedIn, I'm part of something that's called the Pancake Club. There are 5 of us. We were all in marketing at one point in time. And that's how we joined and created the Pancake Club. And we've remained lifelong friends. And many of us have moved on to other disciplines and other things. But there's that bond that we still bounce ideas off of each other and have that connection. So certainly having those connections that you build in the industry that you can talk through challenges and be vulnerable with. And then having people in a friend network and your family that is outside of the industry, I think is also really healthy to have. So you're not always talking about work, that when you leave work, you can also completely leave it behind and just have your other normal life that you're experiencing as well.
Well, I'd love to know, from the leadership side and, obviously, where do you go for that leadership? Do you like to listen to podcasts? Do you like to listen to videos? Do you like a good book? And then is there a good one you'd recommend to the audience, or one you're reading right now or have read recently that stuck with you?
Yes. So I'll talk about, I read a lot. At one point in my life, I read a book a week for many, many years. Unfortunately, during the startup phase of the company, that didn't happen as often, but I still read whenever I get the moment. What I'm reading right now is a book called From Strength to Strength, and an industry friend of mine actually recommended it to me. She read it, my husband's read it, and I am now reading it. But it's talking about kind of the second phase of your career, and especially for people that are called drivers, right? People that have had high growth in their careers, are very driven by work, and knowing that when you hit a certain age, that you transition into another phase in your life, and where you were that driver and that person that was trying to achieve and get into the role, for instance, that I'm in now. Now your focus needs to change to something else, and bringing other people along with you and being a mentor and a sponsor to those, to create the bench and to create a talent pool within our industry. So we have that longevity, and we have people that are continuing to drive the business forward. So it's a really great book that I'm in the middle of. Some other books that I absolutely love. I read everything that Ryan Holiday writes. It started out with the Daily Stoic, and I read a page of that every single day, and I've been doing that for years. I would say that is a book that has absolutely changed my life. It allows you to focus on things, many of those items you know already, but you easily forget when you're in the situation. So it's a great reminder on different things and how you can focus on what you can control and what you can't control. And then all the other books that he's written are absolutely amazing. The Obstacle is the Way, Ego is the Enemy, Stillness is Key, Courage is Calling, and most recently I read Discipline is Destiny. So highly recommend those books. They are very focused on leadership within yourself as well as professionally. Another great resource, I've heard her speak now twice, one at a crew convention, and then most recently at the NMHC Women's event, at the annual event. And it's a woman named Carla Harris. And highly recommend you follow her on Instagram. She does quick videos that you can watch with tidbits of leadership advice. She's written 3 different books, and she talks about her pearls of intentional leadership. And they really are great ways to focus on how to better yourself, how to better your teams, and move forward. So highly recommend Carla Harris and Ryan Holiday. And I read a lot too. Every morning I have a routine I read a lot of different newsletters. I love the LinkedIn Daily Rundown, just getting up to speed on news in general, so we know what's facing us. And then you can also learn from other companies, organizations, on how you can address situations as well.
I want to ask you, what type of trends do you see developing in 2024 for industry? And they could be in any category, like leasing, centralization, prop tech, financing, investments, anything that you see in 2024 and beyond that.
Absolutely. So I think some of what we're going to see is, and we've talked a little bit about it through centralization, but a shift in staffing. I talked about utility players, and I think that is extremely important, that you have people that can fill various different roles at various times. And that was one thing too, that when I look back on my career, I probably made my name. A lot of people knew me through marketing, but I also was always raising my hand to take on that next challenge. If there was an opportunity to take on a project or take on a new department, I wanted to be that person, because I knew that would make me more well-rounded and allow me to continue to grow in my career. So I think the more people can cross-train and learn more about different parts of their organization, the better. And it's really going to be the key to the future. And so I think we have to think about, from a staffing perspective, who is best suited to handle the task, the function, or the skill that needs to be addressed, and put that in the right seat. And sometimes, we're asking, for instance, a marketer to be amazing at branding, at communication, at analytics, and maybe that's not the full skill set. So again, you may have somebody in your revenue management department that is fantastic with analytics and analyzing data. Why can't you split some of those roles and functions up across different disciplines And I think that's really what we're going to see. I also see that we're going to see a shift in the regional manager position. I have the utmost respect for RPMs because I firmly believe it is the most difficult job in any of our organizations. It's the most thankless job. And that position has also changed the most in the 25 years that I've been in the industry. So where there was very little tech when I first joined, now we're asking regional managers to be great at financials, great at marketing, great at managing people, great at managing vendors, great at managing owners or clients. Plus, they have to be experts in all of the technology that we roll out and be able to train their teams. And so I think we are going to see a shift in what the role of the regional manager looks like and setting them up for true success and having them focus on those high value tasks that are going to give, the most value back to the organization and going to give the employee the most satisfaction and the longevity in the industry.
These are some great pearls of wisdom, around leadership. I took down that book and already, while you were talking, placed a hold on it. I'm like 70th in line, but I'm gonna get it soon. As you talk about this and being aware of different roles and I always talk about, especially right now, as people are looking for their next roles. Some people have left companies. Some people are unhappy in their roles. They're looking for that next role. My biggest advice to people is sometimes you may not find the exact role that you've been doing for the last 5-10 years. And you're spot on. Like, I always have felt you join the right rocket ship, you join the right team, and you find a role, just join it. So really like that, I'm curious to know, as you think about, how to learn from others and in different spaces. Obviously, you have a great network in this industry. What other industries do you look to? Do you, is it hospitality? Are you looking at MarTech? Or, and are you looking at insurance tech? Like, where else are you looking for guidance and industries to learn outside of multifamily?
I wouldn't say there's any particular industries, but I think it's just in general. I'm a very curious person. And again, I read a lot. And so when I'm looking at, I read 3 different newsletters to start my morning. I read a lot of information in the New York Times, and there's a lot of trending, great information that's there. And just seeing how are other businesses handling return to work? How are other businesses handling when we were going through COVID, figuring out what to do in those situations. So I think there's so much that can be learned, and being open to any advice and any industries and any companies that are doing something that's revolutionary and how you can transform it into your business.
Jennifer, as we approach the top of the hour and the end of our conversation, I have a question that I really make a point asking every single one of my guests on the podcast. Mm-hmm. How would you like to be remembered? Context is this. We're only around for a short period of time. We don't realize that, I guess, when we're young, because it feels like we have infinite time, which, as we grow older, we realize that that wasn't the case. It was just a trap. Thinking in context, how would you like to be remembered? What would you like your legacy to be?
Sure. I think that, I would like people to know that I led with kindness, that was my first default, is to take the kind approach. And I would like to think that my legacy would be that I left it better than I found it. And if I can accomplish that, then it's a win.
Any final thoughts for us, for the audience? Anything that you wish we would have discussed and we didn't have the opportunity to during this hour?
No, I think you did a great job asking me all kinds of questions, and really appreciate the audience chiming in today.
Chris Moreno, any final thoughts?
That was phenomenal. I can't wait for the next time we can have you on and maybe talk some other topics. JStack, you are one in a million, and you've made an incredible impact on my career and helping me find a seat at the table. When I raised my hand, you got me involved and have made numerous introductions. And I remember back to those leadership conferences and those events. And so thank you for taking the time to learn from others and to bring people in who haven't had the experience and knowledge that you have. So it means so much. And I always like to say, you never forget those people in your life. And that's why I'm now passing it on to others and trying to help them with their careers and get involved. But this has been a lot of fun. And you are just an amazing leader. And I'm so excited of what you're building today and the people who have the opportunity to get to work with you.
Well, thank you, Chris. And thank you, Adrian. Awesome to see everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for watching us today. We reached record audience, so we're very thankful for that. I also want to thank our sponsors for making this broadcast possible: Apartment Snapshot, Kairos Water, and GPS Roof Leak Repairs. We hope to see you back here next week for another very intriguing episode of the Multifamily Hangout. Until then, have an amazing rest of the day and the rest of the week. Take care.